nationally, well, I guess I should say nationally known figure is texting me right now. We don't necessarily see eye to eye on stuff, but he's really upset that I started using Woko Haram because he loves it. Sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. This person can't be delayed, given who it is. All right, now I can focus on you. I'm sorry. When famous people text you, you have to respond occasionally. All right, we got to get into voter ID because my goodness, boy, the world is coming to Georgia. I'll take your phone calls as well. 877-97 Eric 877-973-7425. The Georgia House of Representatives is under attack for, and by the way, you know, that they stormed the Georgia Capitol. Not a lot of national headlines on this. Now, there were no guns and no demands to hang anyone and no gallows outside, but they came in to stage a protest. They did not storm the chambers. They came in to hold a protest against Georgia suppressing the vote. By ensuring the integrity of the process, the Democrats claim that the vote process is going to be suppressed. And you will note the media is played into their hands. The media runs damage control for the Democrats. This is all about voter suppression. 75% of Republicans in the state of Georgia, including 75% of the more than 400,000 Republicans who would not show up in the runoff, believe that the election was stolen and we've got to have voter integrity. All they're doing is providing voter integrity. There are a bunch of competing plans as well, and the competing plans are getting clashed together, mashed together, mushed together, exaggerated together so that no one can really keep an idea of what's going on. You know, there is a plan in the Georgia legislature to buy back everyone's guns and ban the future purchase of guns. Did you know that there's legislation in the Georgia legislature? It has been filed to buy back everyone's guns using taxpayer dollars, forcible buyback of guns, and ban the future purchase of guns. Notice I haven't talked about it. The reason I haven't talked about it is because it's a Democrat who filed it, and there's no chance, even if the Democrats were to take over the legislature, there's no chance that that it would pass. It's unconstitutional. It won't pass. So there's no reason. A lot of people get, oh, look at this legislation that they filed. It's never going to pass. Why waste your time getting worked up about a piece of legislation that's not going to pass? Well, the Democrats are getting worked up about pieces of legislation that'll never pass because it is profitable for them to do so. It keeps legitimate grievances on the left. It allows them to perpetuate myths of voter suppression. Notice that what they're doing is passing a piece of legislation that applies to everyone. No one is singled out. No one is targeted. The Democrats would have you believe it disproportionately impacts Democratic voters. It does no such thing. And the Democrats are focusing on a bunch of pieces of legislation that aren't actually going to pass the legislature. Look at what they're going to do. They're going to stop anybody from voting. They're going to get rid of absentee ballots. Not really. Let me break down what's happening here. There are a bunch of pieces of voter legislation in the state house and the state senate. Some of those pieces of legislation are viable. Some of them are not. Some of them will pass. Some of them will not. What has passed the House of Representatives is the plan that is most likely to pass the legislature. It has something in it that everyone widely agrees with, and that agreement is that we should cut off absentee ballots 11 days before the election. Why? Because you need to get the signatures matched. You need to verify the authenticity. You need to allow people time to come fix a mistake. And then you got to count the ballots. One of the reasons Georgia elections stretch on indefinitely for weeks on end after the election day is because of the amount of absentee ballots that have to be counted. What they want to start doing is when you verify ballots, let's start counting them. You know, under Georgia law now, once you've cast an absentee ballot, you can't show up at the polls and vote and say, hey, can you cancel my ballot? You can't do that anymore. So since your vote is cast, you can't cancel your ballot. Go on and at least get it ready to be tabulated and have a way to delete it. If you die before election day, have a way to delete it. And they have that in place with the Dominion voter systems. They've got this process in place. And this is, by the way, bipartisan agreement on this. It passed as a standalone measure. It's been roped into this measure from the Georgia House of Representatives. So now what else is in there? Well, what else is in there is no restrictions on absentee voting. But they are restricting weekend voting. Now, why are they restricting weekend voting? What they have found, and what the Democrats will privately acknowledge, though they will refuse to concede it publicly, is that poll workers get exhausted and start making mistakes. You're having them work every weekend, 2 weekends, 3 weekends in a row. They've now curtailed it to 2 weekends, and the weekend before the election, you got to pick, do you want it on a Saturday or do you want it on a Sunday? Give the election workers time to rest before the election. They're also limiting where drop boxes can be placed. You can put a drop box at places where voters can go vote. So people can drop off their absentee ballots instead of putting them in the mail if they want, but they're not going to have them spread all over counties. It's too taxing on local boards of election to go round them up and try to find them, get them, make sure that those ballot boxes aren't being tampered with. It's very easy to tamper with a ballot box if you're putting it in the middle of a strip mall, as was the case in some areas of Atlanta. It's real easy for someone to go in there, dump water in there, ruin the ballots, maliciousness. It's all about the integrity of the process. Now, what really has Democrats aggrieved, what really has Democrats mad, is a quirk in Georgia law that the Republicans intend to end. This is the thing that actually has them really hacked off. Under Georgia law, to vote in Georgia, you have to have a photo ID. It can be a driver's license from the state, or it can be a non-driver's license photo ID from the state. Every one of those IDs, driver's license or state ID, comes with a unique number assigned to you, the individual. If you can't afford a special government ID, the state will give you one for free solely for purpose of voting. It's normally $35. If you want it just to vote, it's free. And you can take that, it has a number on it, you take it to the polls. You show them your ID, it gets scanned, and it verifies your identification. You put your signature on it digitally, and it verifies all that. Well, the quirk in Georgia law is that if you voted by absentee ballot and you printed out a form and you mailed the form in with a stamp, you don't have to have your photo ID. You don't have to have your driver's license. You don't have to have any identification at all with an absentee ballot. But in Georgia, you're supposed to have ID to vote. So the Republicans have come up with a very simple solution. Write your photo ID number on your ballot. My Georgia driver's license has a number on it. If I had a photo ID from the state of Georgia, it too would have a number on it. So write the number on the absentee ballot application. And when they pull it up at the Board of Elections, they have the computer systems available. They can pull it up. They can see my signature and my face and my address and verify my address. They can see it all just by that number. In fact, the Secretary of State's office has started deploying this without controversy. Pay attention to this. Without controversy or complaint by Democrats. If you go on the Secretary of State's office now, when you request your absentee ballot, you got to put in your driver's license or your photo ID number to get it. And then you don't have to go through all the verification processes. But if you print out the application, fill it out by hand, and mail it in, you bypass the system. And that's what Democrats have been doing. To break down the integrity of the voting process, they've been bypassing the need for photo ID. So now the Republicans are requiring you put that number down. Or if you don't want to put the number down, send in a copy of your photo ID, government-issued photo ID. That's what the Democrats are complaining about. They're complaining that they figured out a way to bypass the process. And by the way, 70% of voters, including a majority of black voters and Democrats, support photo ID. And that's what the House measure is. Now, if you listen to certain radio stations, including my own radio station in Atlanta, during my own show in the evening, there's an ad running, some old country guy with the good old country music in the background playing subtly. Well, I voted by absentee ballot for, they call it mail-in voting. I voted mail-in voting for 14 years. The Republicans, they done been winning every time, but now suddenly the Republicans, they done lost, and they're blaming mail-in balloting. I don't know why they would curtail my right to vote. I do declare the Republicans, they need to stop this. You should call your legislature right now and tell them you support mail-in balloting. I do declare. That really is. Why the hell is it that the ad campaigns for both sides feel like they need to get redneck Uncle Jimbo to do the ads for them? Every time there's a political ad in Georgia, you know the background. You got the little banjo music in the background. You got a show and farewell going on. I do declare we got a situation here in Georgia, and I need you to vote for Jimbo Uncle Sam Bob, because Jimbo Uncle Sam Bob, he's going to not just get you your used car, he's going to get you your check, your $2,000 check from Joe Biden. I do declare you need to vote for him today. And then you have somebody at the end who's actually the real voice of the guy saying, paid for by Jimbo Uncle Bob. It just, why do they do this? Every time there's an election in Georgia, y'all know it. We had it this last time. And you've also got the women. I saw that Kelly Loeffler, and she thinks she's one of us, but she's some rich plutocrat from Atlanta who flies a private jet. And I just don't know why anyone would want to vote for Ms. Loeffler, because Ms. Loeffler, she's just an elitist. And then you'd have the other woman, and they hold the coffee mug just so, and they stare earnestly at you in the camera, and it's a world's best mom cup, and she's looking at you and said, I just love Kelly and David. Kelly and David are fabulous. Do you know, me here in Middle Georgia, they were able to fight for schools to reopen, and they got more federal money. We should vote for Kelly and David. As if you know them. But it's always this. You got the ad running. It's all over the state. Them Republicans, they going to curtail our mail-in voting privileges. How dare they do that? Yeah. That just, come on, people. Do better. We're not all a bunch of rednecks from BFE. The whole thing is silly. Nonetheless, what the Democrats are doing is they're combining all of the Republican pieces of legislation together and running an ad saying these are all the things they're going to do. Yes, there is legislation advancing in the Senate that will probably pass that restricts absentee voting to just senior citizens and the military. It has no chance of passing the House. David Ralston, the Speaker, has already said it's dead on arrival. There's another piece of legislation in the state Senate that would ban absentee drop boxes altogether. That, too, is dead on arrival in the House of Representatives. There are all sorts of pieces of legislation, and we know already they're dead on arrival in the House, or they're dead on arrival in the Senate. This House legislation is a reasonable compromise. Believe it or not, as much as I'm critical of David Ralston, this actually is a reasonable compromise that he structured in the House of Representatives. And it is the plan most likely to pass. And all it does is require your photo ID number on your absentee ballot application. It also prohibits unsolicited absentee ballot applications. It prohibits people showing up at your door saying they'll be glad to take your absentee ballot off your hands and take it for you. And it prohibits outside groups from pouring money into the state of Georgia, claiming they're going to help run the election. These are reasonable compromises. It ensures the integrity of the process. And, as I've said earlier, they really don't change a lot. If the Democrats were smart, they just keep their mouth shut, or they say, oh, yeah, this is great, let's go with it. And it would totally undermine the confidence of Republicans. But actually what's happening is these do fix the problems the Republican voters were concerned about, and having the Democrats scream like they're screaming right now is only going to further help solidify the confidence in the system.
You can follow Erick around social media at
Well, that's just creepy. The Peter Luger Steakhouse in Brooklyn has partnered with Madame Tussauds The Wax Museum to fill empty seats with wax statues as New York restaurants reopen at 35% capacity. It looks creepy. Look, there's Audrey Hepburn. That's just, oh, look, there's John Hamm, Don Draper from Mad Men standing there. Oh, there's a Jimmy Fallon. There's an Al Roker. That's just creepy. That's really creepy. Oh, the Audrey Hepburn one is super creepy. Wow. I'm sorry to those of you in New York. By the way, that reminds me, you should please support your local restaurants. Support your local restaurants. Go out, support them, help them, encourage them, sustain them. All of that would be very, very helpful, I think. largely because, well, they're on difficult times right now still, and anything you can do to help your local restaurant would be great. Now, if you can't go to your restaurant, if you're not comfortable going to your local restaurant, I got a deal for you, and I hope you guys will take me up on this because I love them, and I'm delighted to have them as an advertiser. And that's Omaha Steaks. I've been a customer of theirs for a long time. I smoked a brisket from them this past weekend. I get seafood from them. I get poultry. I get chicken. I get pork. I get burgers and steaks. They're steak burgers. You know, I've got one of those Blackstone griddles. You can make smash burgers on them, and they're great. Omaha Steaks is fantastic. They have been a fixture in my life for probably 30 years now. They've been around since 1917. They know how to do it well. Right now, you can go get the Butcher's Bestseller package from Omaha Steaks with 4 of their butcher cut filet mignons, 4 of their ultra juicy burgers, 4 pork chops. You got the caramel apple tartlets. My wife loves Christy with her chemo, so she doesn't like nutmeg, and just spice with her treatment right now makes it even worse. These don't have nutmeg in it. She loves them. Individually wrapped, you can pop them in the oven as you want them. And if you order right now, you're going to get 4 more chicken breasts and 4 more burgers for free. What you do is you go to omahasteaks.com. If you look up at the top, you'll see a search bar, and you put the word Georgia in, the name of our state, Georgia. You put it in the search bar, you will see the Butcher's Bestseller package. They've been doing this since 1917. They age their steaks at least 21 days. They do it great. Go to omahasteaks.com, put Erick, E-R-I-C-K, in the search bar, get the Butcher's Bestseller pack today. Don't forget, you're going to get 4 free burgers, 4 free chicken breasts with this package at omahasteaks.com by putting Georgia in the search bar. Now, they're new to us. I hope you will show them some love. I hope you'll go do this. They've got a great selection of stuff. You help us by sending business their way. They track that code. They know we're sending them business. You want to send them business, so use the code Georgia in the search bar. And they really are good. I do really recommend the bacon wrap fillets. I've actually got some in my freezer. I had to order some the other day. They don't send me this stuff for free. I had to buy it myself. And I've been doing meal prep. So I've been going to Tao Fitness here in Macon on Northside Drive. It was a CrossFit box. Now they're more training facility. Go see the trainer. But I got to work on diet, y'all. The beer and pizza diet is not conducive to weight loss. But several friends of mine have said the way I should figure out my diet is where I want my weight to be, eat that many grams of protein a day. Do you know how much protein that is? It's crazy. But I've gotten Omaha Steaks now. They make these chicken breasts, and they're pre-sliced, like for stir fry, and they're frozen, vacuum sealed, so I can take them out in the morning. While I'm doing the show, they're thawed by lunchtime. I can throw them in a wok and do a real quick stir fry. It takes 15 minutes at lunch. And then I can go to the gym in the afternoon and throw it all up when he makes me do burpees. I'm sure y'all wanted to know that. All right. We have other stuff to move on when we come back. The Biden administration has embraced a police reform measure. Ask yourself how many Japanese citizens or residents or descendants are in your neighborhood. On this plan, if they don't go after them, you're all going to be in trouble, and so will your police. I'll explain. Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I've gotten a lot of emails from people, mostly progressives, who just can't imagine the why I would be upset with people not reading Dr. Seuss. And part of the problem here is that no one's ever advocated reading Dr. Seuss's early works. If you weren't here yesterday, Dr. Seuss, there are educators advocating canceling Dr. Seuss now. That Dr. Seuss, you shouldn't read him. Even though his later works were heralded even by Barack Obama 4 years ago for inclusion and diversity. And that's the point for all the people saying, well, what's the big deal? I mean, look at his early works. No one reads I didn't even know the names of some of his early works. But Horton Hears a Who, The Cat in the Hat, Oh, the Places You'll Go, Green Eggs and Ham, as much as I hate green eggs and ham. These are commonly read books. To cancel them is ridiculous, and also shows, which is very common in woke realm, no grace. We will get to the Biden administration police reform measure here in a minute, but I wanted to set the stage for that because I got a caller from Justin calling from Augusta. Welcome.
Hey, Eric, how you doing, buddy?
Good. How about yourself?
Good, man. I appreciate you taking my call. You and I have talked about this before, but I just wanted to have an honest conversation about this as someone who I try really careful to not overuse my platform with politics. I'm in ministry, and I don't necessarily think that that's a line to toe. But this is ridiculous, man. Here's what's ridiculous. I'm a father, I'm a foster father. Dr. Seuss teaches something so incredible. Look at the Sneetches story. If you look at the Sneetches story, what does it teach? That we are all of equal value, regardless of our outside. That alone should have people praising him. Then you have Obama, who talks about all the life lessons we can learn about it. And here's where I think the conversation needs to go. If people who start saying they're pro Dr. Seuss, people are going to say, well, what about his past? What about his past? But the moment you want to bring up the past about a liberal person or a radical left person, they say that we can't let the past go, or we don't have grace. So where's this fine line? Where's this tension at, man? Can we really talk about this?
Yeah, we should be able to talk about it. It is, and I got to be honest with you, I've never read the Sneetches. And
No.
a lot of friends of mine, we actually had it in a collection of works of Dr. Seuss. And it's like the Berenstain Bears as well. You know, they came for them a while back because the Berenstain Bears were too Christian. And it's at some point, people just have to decide not to play. Unfortunately, where this is being set up is in academia, where they're most likely to dabble in woke culture, which makes it hard. Honestly, I feel like I should now go out and buy a collection of Dr. Seuss books for all. I used to give people little piggy banks when they had kids. I think I need to start giving them a collection of Dr. Seuss books.
Yeah, you should. I think you should. Not just to be a jerk, but he actually does teach creative thought, and then he does teach the whole Sneetches thing of value. I remember as a kid watching that, and I remember feeling empathy, feeling pain of how wrong it was that they were treated because they looked different. Like, I actually learned that lesson as a kid from Dr. Seuss.
Well, now you got to learn how to cancel, how to move on from bad people. You know, there is something here. You as a pastor understand this, and it goes back to the story about C.S. Lewis, that when asked what the difference is between Christianity and all the other religions, he says Christianity has a concept of grace. No other religion does. And secularism in particular really does not. To look at the evolution of Dr. Seuss over time and not be willing to recognize that his later stories teach diversity and inclusion in a way he didn't during World War II is absurd. And the idea that we got to not read this later book because of something he did 40 years before it is, I mean, that's or 20 years before it is absurd to me.
Yeah, it is absurd. And I appreciate that you're talking about it. And I hope, let me ask you an honest question. Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to ask you as a pastor, how do you get in church and we hear all the time, love thy neighbor. And when I mention that on radio, I will inevitably get a phone call from someone who says, Well, they're loving their neighbor by not engaging with them because they're afraid they'll say something that offends them, or they're loving their neighbor by telling them they're going to go to hell if they don't repent. No grace, and yet they try to claim as grace. How do you, as a pastor, deal with that situation?
Well, Eric, it's something I think about often. Like I told you before, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I fostered 4 kids. Not a lot of Christians would probably agree with me on this, but here's what I believe. Jesus tells us in John that the world is going to know us by the way we love. And I don't mean that to be generic. I'm not putting a let's love everybody. It means we tolerate everyone's blind spots and failures and weaknesses. No. But what it does mean is I'm going to meet people where they are at. And I also think that there's a fine line of being able to show them how they truly love them. And so with me as a pastor, what I would always teach, I did college and young adults for years, did marriage ministry for years. And I think if you want to truly talk about loving people, let's go look at what Paul tells us the definition of love is. What does it say? It says it keeps no record of wrongs. It says it's patient. It says it's kind. It says that it's something that will go basically to the ends of the earth. And that's a loose translation, obviously, but it means it never fails. So as a pastor, what I try to teach people that I have the honor of shepherding is this. The way you live your life will show how you love, will show that you're a Christ follower, not necessarily what you say. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it totally does. We model the values we reflect, and unfortunately, to some degree, I am a partisan. I believe in participating in the political process, but I do kind of think that there are a lot of people now who have made partisanship the way they live their life, their politics, and that's how they reflect the world. And man, I just think life is too short to be that political all the time.
I have a friend. I know you're on your show, and I really appreciate you having me on. I have a friend who tends to be more on the left, and he posts stuff all the time on social media about stuff he believes. And so I actually messaged him and said, "Hey, can we have an honest conversation?" And so him and I began about a 25-minute conversation the other day, but he had to run because something literally came up in the moment. I could hear it in the background.
Funny how that works.
An honest conversation. No. I'll give him.
No. What I mean is, it's funny when you have these sincere conversations, how it's like the devil is working to stop the conversation.
Oh yeah, no. You and I can definitely agree on that. But I think, Eric, here's what I believe at my core, other than the fact that I do believe that Jesus rose from the dead. I will always say that I believe that to the core. Here's what I believe. I believe in, let's use you and me an example, just for example's sake. I believe in platform A, staunchly. I believe in platform A. I'm gonna vote A. You believe in platform B. You're gonna vote B. And A and B are radically different. While I disagree with you on your platform, Eric, I would stand next to you and I would scream on the top of my lungs, he has the right to believe in B. And I think we've lost that in this country. I really do.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we have. All right, man. Look, this is a good conversation. I appreciate you calling in.
I appreciate your time. Thank you for what you do.
Absolutely. Always good to talk to you. I got to get over to Augusta and hang on. I got to go to RecTech anyway. I need to go to RecTech. If y'all have, I've got my pellet grill is a RecTech. They're made over in Augusta. American made. I need to go hang out with Justin and get my RecTech. Good points, though. We got to find some level of showing grace and canceling Dr. Seuss. I think we should all be willing to agree is a bridge way too far. Now, I want to move on. I would like to, move to the idea of Joe Biden's new crime platform. This is crazy. We need to talk about this. So I mentioned in the last half hour, do you have any Japanese people descended from Japan or China in your neighborhood? Any East Asian descendants, not Southeast, but East Asian descendants? Did you know under Joe Biden's new police reform plan that if you target 5 black citizens and not 5 Asian citizens, it's going to be considered proof of police profiling? Yeah, not per capita, mind you. Joe Biden has backed a police reform bill that could lead to more racial and sexual profiling, such as gender-based stops of female motorists. NBC News is reporting the Biden administration on Monday threw its support behind the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. The administration says this bill is needed to tackle systemic racism in police departments, but the bill could actually cause systemic racism and sexism. The Justice in Policing Act encourages police departments to adopt quotas based on gender and race for traffic stops, pedestrian stops, and interviews. The practical effect would be to encourage police departments to stop innocent women, Asians, and whites just to meet quotas based on gender and race. If police departments don't meet these quotas, they could be sued by the Justice Department or individuals that they stop. Section 311 of the Act forbids what it calls racial profiling. This is defined to include not just race, but also gender in Section 302A6 of the bill. But it defines profiling in such a crudely mechanical way that it actually encourages profiling. Under the bill, what matters is the numbers and the racial bean counting, not actual racism or sexism. Disparate impact in police stops or interviews based on race or gender, for example, stopping more men than women or interviewing more blacks than Asians or whites, is defined as prima facie evidence of a violation. That means the numbers alone are enough for a judge to find a police department in violation of the act. Prima facie evidence is a legal term, meaning the person suing has provided enough evidence to prove something, in the absence of proof to the contrary by the entity being sued. The bill's strange definition of profiling would render all police departments presumptively in violation of the act because men speed more than women virtually everywhere and violate more traffic laws than women, and men commit crimes at a higher rate. Yet stopping men at a higher rate would be deemed suspect under the bill. Now, this is from Liberty Unyielding, a libertarian website. And I want to give to you just a picture of this. Let's do Macon, Georgia. In Macon, Georgia, proportionally, there are more crimes committed by young black men in Macon, Georgia, where I live, than young white men. What the police in Macon, Georgia will have to do now is to stop and interview young white men if they're stopping and interviewing young black men at an equal rate. Even though per capita, I think it's 60-40 black-white in Macon, and the crime is 60-40, let's just say, I think it's actually a little higher, but 60-40 black-white. Even though that's it, if you detain 7 black men, you got to detain 7 white men and 7 Asian men. If you detain 14 white men for traffic violations, you better pull over 14 white women. That's the effect of this George Floyd Act. That's what's going to happen. That they're going to use raw numbers, not per capita. They're going to use raw numbers. It makes 0 sense. It is nonsensical. And yet here we are. And I find the whole thing absurd. Genuinely absurd, and yet that's what we're doing. Why are we doing it? Because the Biden administration has decided it needs to virtue signal instead of actually getting real about police reform. There are fewer and fewer people in the country who deny that there is some need for police reform in the country. We have what has been made visible by dash cams and webcams and phone cameras is that sometimes police use more force than is perhaps necessary. What is also true is that oftentimes people take the video footage and narrate over it and presume to interpret police actions in ways that aren't real to make the police look bad when they did nothing wrong. There are plenty of times where people who aren't in the situation decide, oh, well, in my comfy chair of my living room, I'm going to say the police used excess force. There's got to be a better way to do it and to protect the police. But what Joe Biden and the left have decided to do isn't anything of the sort. It's going to make the situation worse and force police to engage with more people across racial and gender lines just for the sake of avoiding being accused of racial profiling. It's a stupid, stupid piece of legislation.
News and in-depth analysis from
3777.
Hello there. The phone number here is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Let's go to the phones. Josh, calling from Cumming. You're up next. Welcome.
Hey, Eric. Thanks for taking the call.
Sure.
I have been reading, hearing about a push at the federal level to start new or increased programs for subsidized assisted housing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Section 8 and things like that. What bothers me about this is, there's all this angst about the gap in wealth, and a lot of it is justified. But one of the biggest areas of wealth gathering or wealth building is home ownership, property ownership. Yet we spend hundreds of millions, if not more, on all of this subsidized housing that keeps people trapped in it. They start to earn a little bit more, their rent goes up.
Mm-hmm.
They never get out. Why can't we do something on a program of subsidized home ownership? Give them a way to get into a house, give them a fair mortgage rate, interest rate, give them that seed money, and get them out of the cycle. What would be wrong with that?
I don't know off the top of my head what would be wrong with it. And there are groups out there that do this in the private sector, like Habitat for Humanity and the like, that give low interest or no interest loans to get qualified families in. That you're right. One of the problems with government housing and a lot of government programs is they're so based on income that people who need the program sometimes can't get in because they had a good year last year, or they can't get out of them because they know if they have any sort of increase, they're not able to save, they immediately get thrown out of the program. Something does have to be rethought there. There are some thoughtful critiques out there from the Cato Institute, Heritage Foundation, and others on this. The problem is it's almost like a third rail in Democratic politics. If you tweak it at all, the left comes for you, but we do need better house ownership. Although, I do have to tell you, Josh, there is a story out right now in the Wall Street Journal today that there's virtually no housing available in the country. It's the most bizarre thing. The Wall Street Journal was saying realtors cannot recall a market that is such a seller's market, that there's just the level of any housing. I have dreams one day of making it big and being able to buy a house on the beach in Hilton Head. And I track houses in Hilton Head and Sea Pines. And I was looking at a piece of property there that last year was for sale for like $1.5 million, well out of my price range to begin with. But the same property is now $4 million. They've gone up on price. And houses that were $4 million are now $9 million. And I feel like we're in a bubble when you take all this stuff together. And maybe when the bubble pops, it'll be a great way to rethink some of this stuff. Because you are right, the cycle of poverty that government programs can create in people, where when they save that next penny, suddenly they're out of the income bracket and have to be thrown out until suddenly they don't have the money and they can get back in. It's a sad cycle of dependence caused by the government. You probably know people like this, Josh, who last year they were hard hit because of the pandemic, but because the government used their tax rates, it didn't look like they were hurt, so they got no benefits. I know several people in that situation.
I know many people like that.
Yeah, it makes no sense when the government does that. I recall when I was getting scholarships and student loans to go to college, and they wanted to use my parents' income for it, and I was thinking, why are you using my parents' income? It's me, and I was denied some benefits and some scholarships and stuff because they said, oh, well, your parents make so much income. Never mind, they're taking care of my grandparents and have 2 other kids and stuff. We've got to rethink all of that. It makes it, for all the wealth accumulation and talk about taxing the rich, that is an angle we need to rethink. Look, let me leave you there. I appreciate it, Josh. It is something. I think when the government gets too dependent on looking at past year's taxes and then putting in fixed brackets where people can't, they hit a level and then suddenly they're out of it. You're just punishing people. But right now, there's more and more evidence, it seems like. In fact, I sent Philip an article this morning to read about just how the stock market right now is operating more like a lottery. People are convinced they can buy a few bucks of a stock and it'll go up, and they'll take out the cash. And day trading is going back up. The stock market skyrocketing. All of the underlying fundamentals are being ignored. A lot of companies are being purchased where the underlying fundamentals aren't good. I don't think what's going on right now is very sustainable. And it's interesting that Axios yesterday had a story where major world banks are starting to crack down, and Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve are not. And Axios noted that all of the all the governmental bank and lending institutions that are cracking down are all run by decade-long people with degrees in macro or microeconomics. And Jerome Powell, the head of the Fed, was a lawyer who's been doing this for less than 10 years. As if, hey guys, maybe we need to be looking at what everyone else in the world is starting to worry about. And Jerome Powell doesn't seem to be worried about any of it. It's kind of concerning. And that's one reason I'm not an investment guy. Don't take advice from me, but I've been moving more and more stuff into cash just because I'm convinced that something wicked this way comes in the financial markets. I mean, just looking at the housing situation right now, it has all sorts of red flags in it, just to scarcity and everything else. And I suspect inflation is about to come back. Now, we got to move on to other stuff. When we come back, the Cuomo drama is expanding, and oh man, it's hitting CNN now. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. How are you? The phone number, if you would like to be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Well, it's come to this.
I am Chris Cuomo, and welcome to Primetime. Before we start tonight, let me say something that I'm sure is very obvious to you who watch my show. And thank you for that. You're straight with me, I'll be straight with you. Obviously, I'm aware of what's going on with my brother. And obviously, I cannot cover it because he is my brother. Now, of course, CNN has to cover it. They have covered it extensively, and they will continue to do so. I have always cared very deeply about these issues, and profoundly so. I just wanted to tell you that. There's a lot of news going on that matters also, so let's get after that.
Right. This comes on the heels of this, covered by CNN.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo facing new scrutiny tonight after a second former staffer has come forward alleging sexual harassment. Charlotte Bennett, a former executive assistant and health policy advisor, telling the New York Times over the weekend that the governor asked her numerous questions about her personal life, including whether she thought age made a difference in romantic relationships. She alleges Cuomo said he was open to relationships with women in their 20s. Bennett, who was 25 years old, told the Times, "I understood that the governor wanted to sleep with me, and I felt horribly uncomfortable and scared." Late yesterday, nearly 24 hours after the Times first reported Bennett's story, Governor Cuomo issued a statement acknowledging his past comments may have been inappropriate, saying, "I now understand that my interactions may have been insensitive or too personal, and that some of my comments, given my position, made others feel in ways I never intended. I acknowledge some of the things I have said have been misinterpreted as an unwanted flirtation. To the extent anyone felt that way, I am truly sorry about that." Some lawmakers within Cuomo's own party saying his statement is not enough.
You've got a New York congresswoman now demanding that Andrew Cuomo resign. A third woman has come forward, and Kathleen Rice says it's time for him to step down. Anna Ruck, a former member of the Obama administration and 2020 Biden campaign, told the New York Times Monday Cuomo asked to kiss her at a New York City wedding reception in 2019. Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, has gotten a formal referral letter from Cuomo's office to begin an investigation, and two other women, of course. So now we're up to three. By the way, there's a picture of Cuomo with the one woman. He's got his hands around her neck as if he's trying to pull her in. That only works for Joe Biden. Joe Biden gets to be grab hands Joe, but Andrew Cuomo does not. Of course, he and Bill de Blasio have been fighting each other for a while, and Cuomo has done everything he can to attack de Blasio. Now de Blasio has the upper hand.
Yes, Jake, and we have to believe women who come forward and fully investigate. And, you know, the governor issued a total non-apology earlier, and in effect treated sexual harassment as some kind of laughing matter. It's not a laughing matter. It's not a joke. It's very, very serious stuff. And we need a full investigation. If it proves that these allegations are true, how can someone lead a state if they've done these kind of things?
And one more from de Blasio.
I think when someone's done something wrong, they need to say, I did something wrong, and decide what action they're going to take as a result. But it's even more horrible if it's something like sexual harassment or taking advantage of high office and intimidating a young woman. To laugh it off is even more troubling. It's not a laughing matter. So, you know, people who've done something wrong need to admit it and then talk about what needs to change. And I certainly didn't hear that.
Yeah. You know, de Blasio is doing this because he and Cuomo can't stand each other. That's all. He would otherwise have his back. Whatever happened to believe all women, though? Even Cuomo was saying believe all women in the Kavanaugh stuff. Now he's like, oh, they need a fair hearing. And I'm sorry if it wasn't my intention. But we need to circle back. I have said for some time, I believe the media discredits itself and helps give rise to conspiracy theories out there. Ross Douthat in the New York Times has a intriguing piece about the rise of conspiracy theories out there. He writes, in part, no problem concerns journalists and press watchers so much these days as the proliferation of conspiracy theories and misinformation on the internet. We've never confronted the level of conspiracy thinking in the U.S. previously. Marty Baron, the former executive director of the Washington Post, told Der Spiegel in a recent interview, his assumption, widely shared in our profession, is that the internet has forged an age of false belief, encouraged by social media companies and exploited by Donald Trump, that requires new thinking in how to win the battle for the truth. My fellow opinion writer Charlie Wurtzel recently explored the work of the digital literary expert Michael Caulfield, who argues that the usual laudable impulse toward critical thinking and investigation is actually the thing that most often leads online information seekers astray. Instead of always going deeper, following arguments wherever they seem to lead, he suggested internet users be taught to simplify, to check arguments quickly against mainstream sources, determine whether a given arguer is a plausible authority, and then move on if the person isn't. But that education won't be effective if it tells a too simplistic story where all consensus claims are true and all conspiracy theories are empty. In reality, a consensus can be wrong, and a conspiracy theory can sometimes point towards an overlooked or hidden truth. And the approach that Caulfield proposes, to say nothing of the idea of a centralized office of reality, seems likely to founder on these rocks. If you tell people not to listen to some prominent crank because that person doesn't represent the establishment view or the consensus position, you're setting yourself up to be written off as a dupe or a deceiver whenever the consensus position fails or falls apart. I could multiply examples of how this falling apart happens. I'm old enough to remember, for instance, when only cranks doubted that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. But the last year has given us a thuddingly obvious case study. In January and February of 2020, using a follow the consensus method of online reading could have given you a wildly misleading picture of the COVID disease's risks, how it was transmitted, and whether to wear masks and more. Is there an alternative to leaning so heavily on the organs of consensus? I think there might be. It would start by taking conspiracy thinking a little more seriously, recognizing not only that it's ineradicable, but also that it's a reasonable response to both elite failures and the fact that conspiracies and cover-ups often do exist. I want to focus on that. Chris Cuomo had his brother on repeatedly during the COVID-19 situation. Last year, Chris Cuomo was buddy-buddy with his brother on television, on CNN, all the time. And when critics of the media said this is a conflict of interest, CNN said the people need some humor and levity, and the Cuomo brothers are bringing it. At the time this happened, in May of 2020, a writer at Politico, a reporter from Florida named Mark Caputo, ran a piece and said, this is from May 14th, 2020. Good evening and greetings from Florida, where we feel the need to inform you that it's not a post-apocalyptic hellscape of coronavirus infection and cadavers stacked like corkboard. That is, Florida just doesn't look nearly as bad as the national news media and sky is falling critics have been predicted for about 2 months now. But then the national news media is mostly based in New York and loves to love its Democratic governor, Andrew Cuomo, about as much as it loves to hate Florida's Republican governor, Ron DeSantis. DeSantis looks more right than those who criticize the Sunshine State's coronavirus response. According to the latest Florida figures, fewer than 2,000 have died and around 43,000 have been infected. That's a fraction of the dire predictions made for Florida when spring breakers swarmed the beaches, and those numbers were dwarfed by similarly sized New York, which has seen 12 times more deaths and nearly 8 times more infections. More people reportedly died in New York nursing homes than in all of Florida. DeSantis is actually polling worse than Cuomo in their respective states, and the Florida press is wondering why. Part of that is style. Cuomo has a smooth delivery, a deep and calming voice, and an attitude that projects he can answer any question. DeSantis sometimes comes across as peevish and defensive, has made a misstatement or two, and was mocked for struggling to put on a mask. But most of the difference between DeSantis and Cuomo is due to politics. DeSantis governs a politically divided state. Cuomo is a scion of Democratic royalty in a deeply Democratic state. Yes, there's media bias too. Cuomo also has something else DeSantis doesn't, a press that defers to him, one that prefers to cover quote-unquote Florida morons at the beach, where it's relatively hard to get infected, over New Yorkers riding cramped subway cars where it's easy to get infected. In fact, people can still ride the subways for most hours of the day in New York, but Miami Beach's sands remain closed. Maybe things would be different if DeSantis had a brother who worked in cable news and interviewed him for a sweet moment in prime time. That was Mark Caputo writing in May of 2020, and it should be noted that much of the mainstream media and the political left excoriated Caputo for writing that. Now that the veneer has worn off and Donald Trump is not there for Andrew Cuomo to be compared to, the media can turn on Andrew Cuomo. Someone who can't is his brother. And this gets back to Ross Douthat and the conspiracy theories. It was abundantly obvious to a lot of people on the right in March, April, May, June of last year that the media was fluffing up Andrew Cuomo as a way to discredit both Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump. They would not ask Andrew Cuomo critical questions and ignored the differences in deaths to paint a terrible picture of Florida. Remember the photographs taken with telegraphic lenses that make people more compressed on the beach than they actually were? The press attacked Ron DeSantis. They ran the video over and over of the kids at spring break. When the media discredits itself, and CNN discredited itself, and the fact that Brian Stelter, the CNN reliable sources guy, would circulate Chris Cuomo's comments that he can't cover his brother after months of giving Chris Cuomo a pass by covering his brother, it expands the hypocrisy at CNN and also expands the doubt. So Ross Douthat comes along with a column about conspiracy theories, and all I can think is part of the reason we have the conspiracy theories we have today is because no one can trust the media. No one trusts what they're hearing from CNN. CNN used to be the place that you go, whether you liked Fox or not, you could at least go get the news from CNN, and they played it fairly straight. Even as they had a lot of liberal bias, the broad headlines typically told you what was going on. You can't really trust that anymore, can you? You certainly can't go to the New York Times where Boko Haram has taken over and set up a terrorist training camp. You can't go across the media anymore. From Fox, you get a center-right perspective. From MSNBC, you get a far-left perspective. From CNN, you get a center-left perspective. From NPR, you get a left to far-left perspective. Where do you just get the news? The who, what, where, when, why, and how? Where do you get that anymore? I don't know that you do. And people realize it on the left and right. The media is no longer trustworthy. Because the media is no longer trustworthy, people go in search of news themselves, and they do deep dives, and they find people who come across as credible who maybe aren't. We're selling them a bag of goods. The number of people I encountered in the election who were sending me videos to look at that had pre-printed narration of what was going on and explanations, and what do you think about this? What about this? You're wrong. What about this? And they were being lied to, and to this day, I get people who email me angrily because I pointed out the thing they believed actually was a lie. But they couldn't trust the media, so they went to find stuff. And what everyone does, myself included, is go for the things that confirm our already pre-existing biases. So if you thought the election was stolen, you were immediately going to the stuff that showed you how the election was stolen. If you thought the election wasn't stolen, you were immediately going to the stuff that showed it wasn't stolen. There were very few people, and I do include myself in this, who were going to both sides trying to see what was going on. Were problems overstated? Yes. Were there problems? Yes. Was there fraud? Yes. Was it enough to throw out the election? No. Were the Dominion voter systems hacked? No. Were they throwing the election to Biden? No. Were there discrepancies? Yes. Did local politicos try to shape the election? Yes. Sometimes life is more complicated, but also sometimes life isn't a conspiracy. Sometimes it's all about incompetence. It's not about nasty machinations. And a lot of the incompetence people would point to and say, oh, this is proof of a widespread conspiracy to steal the election. No, it was just an idiot who didn't know what they were doing, or they were tired and screwed up. And those little mistakes get amplified as truth. And it's amazing to me how you can find one person who screwed up, and then the conspiracy theorists amplify that across the board into everything. That, oh, well, if this one person screwed up, imagine, and it was malicious. Turns out they're a partisan hack. And the conspiracies take off. The conspiracies, though, are given breeding ground, I don't think because of Donald Trump or the internet, per se. They find a home there and they spread there. But conspiracy theories take off because the media in the United States has so far destroyed its credibility, nobody on the left or the right trusts the media to get it right anymore. And so they go off and try to find their own stuff. And there are people out there, charlatans, con men, and grifters, waiting to take advantage of the people who all they want is the truth, and instead stumble upon a well-packaged lie that looks like the truth.
You can follow Erick around social media at EW.
Hello there, it is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Do y'all know what women is spelled with an X? This is your dumb story of the day. So we moved from Black History Month to Women's History Month. And, well, Twitch, which is an online streaming gaming platform, sent out a tweet. And it wanted to celebrate women's history by spelling women with an X instead of an E. So it was WOMXN. One of the dumbest things to have happened. So the original tweet from Twitch was March is Women's History Month. Join us in celebrating and supporting all the women creating their own worlds, building their own communities, and leading the way on Twitch. And it was all spelled WOMXN. It's kind of like Latinx. It's not really a word. Well, there was actual major blowback, not just from the right, but across the board. And so now they've had to bend over backwards and apologize. Here's their series of tweets. While we originally wanted to use a word, it's not a word, that acknowledges the shortcomings of gender binary language. Gender binary language, my foot. After hearing directly from you, including members of the LGBTQIA+ community on Twitch, we will be using the spelling women, spelled properly, moving forward. We want to assure you that we have and will continue to work with the Alphabet Gang community. That is the LGBTQIAAITPIA community. We're still learning. Our good intentions don't always equate to positive impact, but we're committed to growing from these experiences, doing better, ensuring we're inclusive to all. Notice all of the words to prevent cancellation. We're committed to growing, doing better, ensuring we're inclusive to all. By the way, have you noticed it's no longer, it used to be the LGB community, and then it was the LGBT community, and then it was the LGBTQ community, and now it's the LGBTQIA+. Wait until the rest of the community complains that they've been reduced to a plus symbol. It's only a matter of time before they got to do just call it the Alphabet Gang. The Alphabet Gang. Moving forward, we shall endeavor to call it the Alphabet Gang. Charlie thinks I'm being too ridiculous anyway when I add all the letters together and throw in the ABC. Personally, I think the branding is off. I would go with BLT and G because who does not love a BLT? But that's just me. So we go with the Alphabet Gang because it's just too cumbersome to throw out every letter out there and then worry about people's feelings when you miss their letter. Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you would like to be a part of the program, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Charlie was just on Twitter with this. I had it in the show notes, and this is just, we got to spend a few moments on this. This is from ABC News. States around the country are reporting a significant decline in the number of students enrolled in public school because of the coronavirus pandemic, leaving experts and educators concerned about the trend and its potential long-term consequences. A notable number of students seem to have simply fallen off the grid, not showing up for online or in-person instruction, their whereabouts unknown by school officials. Given the chaos caused by the pandemic and the lack of data, it is difficult to truly determine the exact magnitude of the problem, which seems to be disproportionately affecting already vulnerable student populations, among them homeless students, children with disabilities, children of immigrants, children in foster care, and children of color. A recent study by Bellwether Education Partners, a nonprofit that focuses on underserved communities, estimates that approximately 3 million of the most educationally marginalized students in the country may have been missing from schools since March 2020 when the pandemic forced school closures. The group said it arrived at the number by calculating a likely percentage of at-risk groups not in school based on media reports and available data. ABC News contacted officials from the Departments of Education in all 50 states and found that the problem appears to be nationwide. Although some states reported that they do not track such information, many others said that they have seen a significant decline in their enrollment numbers, and still others have reported they have thousands of missing students. In Michigan, K-12 enrollment decreased this fall by 53,000 students out of 1.5 million. In a December op-ed, State Superintendent Michael Rice said much of the drop was due to factors such as an annual decline in enrollment for the past 10 years, parents opting to hold their children back from kindergarten, and an increase in the number of homeschooled students, approximately accounting for 40,000 of those students. However, he said of significant concern are the approximately 13,000 students fully unaccounted for. In Dallas, Texas, which is home to approximately 153,000 students last year, there are about 9,000 high schoolers, 2,000 middle schoolers, and 1,000 elementary school students unaccounted for. And in Florida, officials are trying to determine the whereabouts of nearly 88,000 students who were expected for the 2020-21 academic year and failed to show up in the fall. My producer notes online that these children aren't missing. They've been abandoned by the states and the governments that are supposed to educate them. And that's actually what's happening. You know, when Georgia, where I am, was looking at shutting down, one of the last places to close down were schools, and the governor of Georgia didn't want to close them down despite heavy criticism from Democrats. And he cited a couple of things, and this was last year, in March of last year. One of the things the governor of Georgia cited was that there really is no data that the virus is transmitting among kids. A data point that holds up to this day. Another issue, the biggest issue, was the number of kids who, if they were not in school, would not have access to meal programs or to those who might watch over them if they were in abusive households. That issue weighs near and dear on Brian Kemp and his wife Marty's hearts. They are big advocates against human trafficking. They are foster parents themselves. They don't talk about that. They do not talk about their love of the foster care program because they don't want to bring negative attention on the kids who were in their houses. And they did not want to close schools in Georgia because they knew a lot of kids would be left in households where there's abuse. And ultimately had no choice at the time, only closed down for a month, But then a lot of schools refuse to open back up. We don't know where all these kids are. The government has lost track of them. Commiserate with that is this whole idea that homeschooling is bad. There's this belief on the left that if you homeschool your child, we don't necessarily know what you're teaching. You may be indoctrinating them in, I don't know, something like Christianity or some such, which is a problem. We got real issues, and one of the issues that we got to deal with is, what do we do with getting kids back in the school system? My fear is this, and you can see it coming with Boko Haram. Government shut down and got kids out of school. They've refused in many parts of the country to reopen and allow kids back in. There are kids who, believe it or not, are homeless. They live in their cars with their parents or in homeless shelters. There are poor kids in rural parts of various states that don't have access to high-speed internet, or poor kids who can't afford computers, even in cities. They're all being left behind. My guess is that within the next 10 years, what we're going to see is Boko Haram and its allies insist in further redistribution of resources and quote-unquote equity because they themselves screwed kids out of an education. Because they themselves punished kids and shut down, and now suddenly, oh my gosh, we got to deal with this issue. We've got to redistribute resources because we left these kids behind, and those kids, they've fallen behind, and now these rich kids from private schools and the homeschoolers, they're getting ahead, they're getting the good jobs. We got to punish them to help those that we punished originally. You know it's going to happen. You know there's going to be a great push for social redistribution to help the kids who got left behind by the left during the pandemic. And the way they're going to do it is they're going to punish the kids whose parents either homeschooled them or paid for private schools so they can keep getting their education. Look at what's happening in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. In the suburbs of Washington, you've got a group of people up there who are in education, and they are angry with parents for coming together and pooling their money to hire tutors for their kids. Yes, public school parents in the Washington suburbs are pooling their money with other parents to hire tutors to do classroom instruction to keep their kids' minds active. And the local school system is livid because some parents aren't participating and can't afford it. And that means some of the kids are going to fall behind, and that's not fair. Meanwhile, Politico Europe has this story. Schools with controls in place to prevent the spread of coronavirus show similar levels of infection among staff compared with the wider community, according to research on English schools released on Monday. By contrast, studies on care homes and healthcare professionals show far higher rates of infection. The survey, conducted by Public Health England, the Office of National Statistics, looked at the current prevalence of disease as well as past infection. Europe's scheduled return of staff and pupils to the classroom has prompted many teachers to raise concerns over increased risk of infection. But if the study holds, there should be limited cause for worry as long as control measures that work in the community, like enhanced cleaning, limited gatherings, and social distance, remain in place. And some schools don't want to do that. They just keep fudging the data. And kids are disappearing from the rolls. And it's the state's problem for shutting down the schools and keeping them shut down despite the data. And yet, you give it a decade, and you, the people who got your kids educated, y'all are the ones who are going to be blamed. Those of you who engaged are going to be blamed. You know, in California, they're circulating a PowerPoint that shows some kids, actually, they like it. Some kids like to be to study from home. Some kids like remote learning and the Zoom conferences, and they're thriving, and it's good for them because they're not being bullied in school. Pay no attention to the suicide statistics and rates of depression. Maybe then it's time to go to a hybrid model where kids who want to study from home can do that, and kids who want to go to school can. That would certainly help with the limiting in schools. That would certainly help with the social distancing, but they don't want to do that either. It's all or nothing either way. But we should put a bookmark on this program, because I intend to be on radio for at least the next 20 or 30 years. And within the next decade, we are going to have to revisit this issue where I can have an I told you so moment when the left comes to punish the kids who went to school this year because their schools were open and they are somehow competitively advantaged over everyone else. You know what's going to happen.
You're listening to the Erick Erickson Show, the perfect.
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. When we come back, I want to talk about the Republicans actually are putting together a plan to take back Congress. I'll give you the inside scoop. I want to spend a couple of moments with you and explain to you something that's going on in churches around the country, particularly evangelical churches. There is a great debate now over critical theory, particularly CRT, critical race theory. Critical theory is a Marxist-derived philosophy that is started in a lot of law schools. And there are some people, like, for example, David French at the Dispatch, who say you can derive some merit from critical theory. I am in the camp that we should not be using Marxist philosophical thought to explain anything in the United States. Those who essentially embrace critical theory believe that critical theory allows us to see the world through the lens of power and power imbalances. One of the things with critical theory is, for example, how communists argue that we've never done communism right. Well, people who embrace critical theory essentially say that unless you're well studied in it and have degrees in it, you can't really explain it. You're not an authority on it. So, for example, Tim Keller is an advocate of racial reconciliation within evangelical churches. But Tim Keller is an opponent of critical theory. And he's being attacked by conservatives for saying he is a critical theorist, even though he's written highly critically of it, denouncing it. and it gets attacked by people who embrace it. While the critical theorists say Tim Keller can't actually talk about the Bible because he's a white man and the Bible wasn't written by white men. Keller actually provides the greatest explanation for critical theory I have found out there. I want to read you some of it. Drawing on the teachings of Karl Marx, what can be called postmodern critical theory has emerged very recently with an account of justice different from all the others. Critical theory argues that the explanation for all unequal outcomes in wealth, well-being, and power is never due to individual actions or to differences in cultures or to differences in human abilities, but only and strictly due to unjust social structures and systems. Second, all art, religion, philosophy, morality, law, media, politics, education, and forms of the family are determined not by reason or truth, but by social forces. Everything is determined by your class consciousness and social location. Religious doctrine, together with all politics and law, are always at bottom a way for people to get or maintain social status, wealth, and therefore power. Third, therefore, reality is nothing but power. And if that is the case, then to see reality, power must be mapped through the means of intersectionality: race, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity. If you're white, male, straight, cisgender, then you have the highest amount of power. If you're none of these, you're the most marginalized and oppressed. Only powerlessness and oppression bring moral high ground and true knowledge. The way power is exercised is through language, through so-called dominant discourses. A dominant discourse is any truth claim, whether grounded in supposed reason and science or in religion and morality. Language does not merely describe reality, it constructs it. Cultures, like people, can be mapped through intersectionality. In one sense, no culture is better in any regard than any other culture. All cultures are equal and valid, but people who see their culture as better and judge other cultures as inferior, even people who see their own culture as normal and judge others as exotic, are members of an oppressive culture. Neither individual rights nor individual identity are primary. Traditional liberal emphasis on individual human rights is an obstacle to radical change. That's essentially critical theory. Now, people who are critical theorists have criticized Tim Keller for accurately describing critical theory because he points out deeply incoherent issues within critical theory they don't think are deeply incoherent. For example, he writes, if all truth claims and justice agendas are socially constructed to maintain power, then why aren't the claims and agendas of the adherents of this view subject to the same critique? It's a fair question, and they don't like you asking it. There's a situation within a lot of evangelical churches now where some people within the churches have embraced critical theory, and other people within churches are screaming about critical theory as a way to never have to address race-based sin within churches. You know, if we're all sinners and racism is a sin, then certainly racism can invade churches. It is possible. And I'm in the camp that thinks that churches need to address the issue. I'm also in the camp that thinks critical theory is not the way to address the issue, because critical theory cannot actually reflect Scripture, where there's absolute truth and there is absolute grace and there's absolute forgiveness, and Scripture is colorblind. There's neither Jew nor Greek. There's neither male nor female. Critical theory requires us to see those things. When you hear pastors and others say we must be conscious of race and must be conscious of class, they're pulling from critical theory. When you hear politicians say we can't be a colorblind society anymore, not only are they rejecting Martin Luther King, they're embracing critical theory. And I have a real hard time with the people in churches these days whenever the issue of racial reconciliation goes and say, oh, that's critical theory. We can't discuss this. No, we got to move on, when there are real problems. And they're just screaming about critical theory to avoid engaging the issue. But I got a big problem with people who try to grab hold of critical theory and run with it and say, this is what we have to use. This is the tool. This explains everything. Using worldly tools that are derived from Marxism, a philosophy that is completely antithetical to faith of any kind, except in the state, is not wise for churches to dabble in. And frankly, when you listen to and take seriously the proponents of critical theory, what they essentially argue is that unless you are a critical theorist, you can't understand it. And that allows them pervasive control of the conversation. When the conversation, if you understand what critical theory is about, if you understand it at all, what they're essentially saying is that there can be no grace, there can be no common ground, because it's always about power imbalances. Now, what they want is for themselves to get power, and then they can shut down the conversation. Because remember, one of the issues with critical theory is it's all about language, dominant discourse. This is why you have so many people on the left these days screaming about free speech, that free speech is no longer valued. It's because of critical theory. Let me again read you from Tim Keller. A dominant discourse is any truth claim, whether grounded in supposed reason and science or in religion and morality. Language does not merely describe reality, it constructs it. Power structures mask themselves behind the language of rationality and truth. So academia hides its unjust structures behind talk of academic freedom, and corporations behind talk of free enterprise, science behind talk of empirical objectivity, and religion behind talk of divine truth. All of these seeming truth claims are really just constructed narratives designed to dominate, and as such, they must be unmasked. Reason, debate, and freedom of speech, therefore, is out. It only gives unjust discourse airtime. The only way to reconstruct reality in a just way is to subvert dominant discourse, and that requires control of speech. That's where we are in a lot of churches these days, too. You've got, for example, a movement within some evangelical churches for racial reparations, that the government should go with racial reparations, that it is just, and they mask it in biblical language, and then dare to denounce anyone who criticizes them as being polluted by the dominant discourses that must be broken down, or filled with racism, or unwanting to let go of their own power. By you not wanting your hard-earned money to be redistributed to someone who doesn't have it makes you a bad person in critical theory. We're seeing this in some churches, some evangelical churches, some churches within my own denomination, the PCA, are embracing this nonsense. Fact of the matter is, there are problems in and out of churches regarding race in this country for historic reasons. But trying to embrace a Marxist philosophy to untangle it and deal with it causes more harm than good, particularly when the practitioners of it tell everyone who doesn't practice it, well, you don't really understand it, you're not allowed to deploy it. And when they deploy it, part of what it is they've got to silence anyone who dares speak up against them. You need to be mindful of what critical theory is. We will spend some more time talking on it. I don't want to do deep dive educational stuff here, but this stuff is serious, and it's coming more and more in politics and churches, and it's polluting and corrupting people. It's polluting and corrupting conversations. It's trouble. Leave it to the Marxists to find a way to insert themselves. Deeply, deeply frustrating. Just unfortunate that it would happen. Anyway, when we move on, Congress, the Republicans, they got a plot to take it back, and I want to tell you what it is. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show, all across the land these days. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. You should know out of the gate here, the Boko Haram today is issuing more terrorist demands, this time in USA Today, that we should stop giving the COVID vaccine to old people first and prioritize people of color. Vaccinating by age group is unfair, particularly to minorities. Advisory panel tells CDC. They're back. They're back. Many states prioritized COVID-19 vaccines for people over 75, then moved to those over 65. But they shouldn't keep stepping down in age, an advisory committee to the CDC said Monday. The approach is inherently unfair to minorities, committee members said, because they have a lower life expectancy and because people of color are dying of COVID-19 at younger ages than white Americans, even in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. I'm not in favor of any part of an age eligibility bracket under 65, said Jose Romero, a pediatric infectious disease specialist at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences, Little Rock, and chairman of the advisory committee. The committee disagreed with plans in some states to require people to show proof that they have two medical conditions on a pre-specified list before being allowed to be vaccinated. Now, I agree with that. That's stupid. People with two medical conditions that are well controlled might be at lower risk. For example, although type 2 diabetes is considered a highest risk condition, type 1 isn't always, even though people with that less common autoimmune version are at the same risk. Yes, there will be some people who lie about their medical conditions. There are always those who find a way to cheat. But it's better to let a few cheaters in than deny vaccine to people who really need it. The other category of people who should be prioritized are those who care for others who may not have been able to be vaccinated. Every state makes its own vaccination allotment plan, so there's a lot of mixed messages about who should be prioritized. For that reason, committee members said the Johnson & Johnson vaccine should be added to the general pool of available vaccines. Now, part of this is legitimate concern that when you get into younger populations, make it available to everyone. Just go on and open the door. You got all the 65 and up vaccinated, give it to everybody now. First come, first serve. Let the people over 65 who haven't gotten it jump to the front of the line. That's sound public policy. But a lot of this is also woke critical theory nonsense of we have to give it to the underprivileged communities. Regardless of their risk of mortality, regardless of their risk of fatality, let's give it to them before we give to other people as a way to somehow redistribute equity in this country. Why don't we just make it available to everybody, regardless of race or gender or age? Make it available to everybody now. I think there's enough time. So starting next week, next Monday, here in Georgia, teachers will be able to get it. There's a story in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution of teachers going across state lines now to get the vaccine. Okay, go. They're trying to do the best they can with a limited allotment, but the allotment is increasing. And the Johnson & Johnson one-dose vaccine actually appears to be quite effective. But we gotta have woke politics. It would not be America today if we did not also have woke racial grievance mixed in with everything. Look, that's not to say there isn't legitimate grievance out there. There is, but most of it these days seems to be hysteria. All right. We got to move into the House Republican plan to take back the House of Representatives. Part of this is, let me just get you to the bottom line. There are going to be some member-on-member primaries coming up. There's a rumor afoot in Georgia still that the Republicans may try to join Marjorie Taylor Greene and Barry Loudermilk together, make it more suburban Atlanta. If you will recall, Marjorie Taylor Greene she wanted to run in the 6th congressional district, couldn't get a stronghold, couldn't get traction, so she moved up to Tom Graves' district when he decided to retire. And in moving to Graves' district, she was able to win. I mean, a pile of dog poop, if it had an R next to its name, would win in that district. It is designed for a Republican to win. So they want to merge Loudermilk and Green's districts together, make it more suburban Atlanta Republicans who don't like green, so maybe Loudermilk can defeat her. Maybe. No guarantee. Republicans, however, could pick up Congress solely on redistricting in Texas, Florida, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, and Montana. Montana's going to get another seat in Congress, even though Charlie moved. But you need to understand how they want to do this. This is from Axios. A document has been drafted by a super PAC, sanctioned and blessed by Kevin McCarthy, the House Republican leader. It names top Democrats to target, including Jared Golden of Maine, Matt Cartwright of Pennsylvania, and Ron Kind of Wisconsin, and the type of Republican candidates to beat them. The Congressional Leadership Fund spent $140 million during the 2020 cycle, helping Republicans defy the odds and coming within 5 seats of winning the House. The group now plans to play a key role in shaping the 2022 contests. The memo, written by Dan Constan, singled out Golden, Cartwright, and Kind because they live in Trump-friendly rural working-class districts. And they recommend, for example, star Navy SEAL Derek Van Orden to seek a rematch with Kind, but says the GOP needs to find new, stronger recruits to take on Golden and Cartwright. And in 2020, all 15 of the seats Republicans flipped were won by women, a minority, or a veteran. Continuing to recruit similar candidates is a foundational building block for the majority in 2022. In other words, they want diversity in the ranks, not just white men. House Republican candidates outperformed Donald Trump in the suburbs. They don't have to be Republican killing fields like they were under Trump if they're women, minorities, and veterans running. And Republicans will, they claim, benefit from Democratic overreach on school closures, curtailment of fracking, pipeline constellation, and there's an alarm sounded about insufficient Republican candidate fundraising, calling it the single biggest threat to Republicans taking back the majority. It's true. It's true. They got to raise more money. So here's the thing. The Republicans have the potential to see the Democrats overplay their hands. Now that sounds obvious, but exactly on what issues? There are several issues percolating that Democrats are convinced that they win on, including woke culture, because in Democratic bubbles, it's all they talk about. Listen to John Brennan, the former CIA guy, Democratic partisan hack on MSNBC. Listen to this.
Well, I must say, to Claire's point, I'm increasingly embarrassed to be a white male these days. And light of what I see of my other white males saying, but it just shows that with very few exceptions, like Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, there are so few Republicans in Congress who value truth, honesty, and integrity. And so they'll continue to gaslight the country the way that Donald Trump did. And the fact that this has such security and safety implications for the American public and for the members of Congress, again, as Claire said, it is just a disgusting display of craven politics that really should have no place in the United States in 2021.
The fact that this guy wants to say all of that and that he's embarrassed to be a white man, there's a cultural moment coming with the wokeness and the shame, because most people aren't ashamed. And yet that increasingly is a talking point from the Democrats. It's also increasingly a talking point from the Democrats that we got to flood the border and let all the illegals come into this country. And I think you're going to have trouble here. Listen to the new Homeland Security Secretary.
Minutes to provide you with an overview of what we have done and are continuing to do and what we are dedicated to achieving. We are dedicated to achieving and, quite frankly, are working around the clock to replace the cruelty of the past administration with an orderly, humane, and safe immigration process. It is hard and it will take time, but rest assured we are going to get it done. Let me explain to you why it is hard and why it is going to take time. I think it is important to understand what we have inherited because it defines the situation as it currently stands. Entire systems are not rebuilt in a day or in a few weeks. To put it succinctly, the prior administration dismantled our nation's immigration system in its entirety. When I started 27 days ago, I learned that we did not have the facilities available or equipped to administer the humanitarian laws that our Congress passed years ago. We did not have the personnel, policies, procedures, or training to administer those laws. Quite frankly, the entire system was gutted. In addition, they tore down the Central American Minors Program that allowed children to access laws of protection without having to take the perilous journey north. They cut off funding to the Northern Triangle countries of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. No planning had been done to protect the frontline personnel of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection and other frontline personnel that address the needs of individuals coming to our border.
You got that. It's Donald Trump's fault. He dismantled everything. But then after saying he dismantled everything, he stopped all of the programs that keep people from flooding the border. He stopped all the programs to keep people in their country stabilized. Then the same Homeland Security Secretary who said all of that says this.
Do you believe that right now there's a crisis at the border?
I think that the answer is no. I think there is a challenge at the border that we are managing, and we have our resources dedicated to managing.
No crisis at the border. Donald Trump did all these things causing people to flood the border, and there's no crisis. Here's Stephen Miller rebutting this.
At the same time, it makes our nation less secure because border agents have to be redirected away from counter-narcotics, counter-trafficking, counter-intelligence. And instead, they have to be put into a humanitarian setting to provide basic care and daily necessities to the thousands of people flooding across to take advantage of Joe Biden's catch and release policies. The cartels aren't stupid.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing. They'll send across massive numbers of family units, massive numbers of children to one area, diverting border agents, diverting our assets so they can push across dangerous contraband. So not only is this going to bankrupt our healthcare system, not only is this going to spread COVID, not only is it going to drain our treasury, but it's going to mean more drugs, more weapons, and more criminal elements are able to get into the United States. We have a border for a reason.
So you got the Homeland Security Secretary saying that the Trump administration caused all the problems we're having at the border, but then says it's not a crisis. And as Stephen Miller points out, when you tell them all, come on, we're going to give you all amnesty, they're going to come. I want to get his full name. This is clip 9. It is, I don't have his full name here. Democratic Representative Gonzalez was on CNN to talk about the Biden proposal that has so many people coming towards the border, hoping to get into the country easily. And listen to this.
I think if children end up on our border, we have to do what's humane and what's the way Americans have always acted and done what's right for mankind around the world. So we'll have to deal with it. But what I'm saying is we need to have a policy in place to prevent children and adults from making this 2,000-mile walk to our border. And when we send the wrong message to Central America that if you make it to our southern border, you're going to be processed and released, you could pretty much assure that you're going to have tens of thousands of people coming up making this very dangerous trek. We need to find a safer solution to deal with asylum seekers.
What? You mean tell them to come one, come all, the border's open? Isn't a sustainable? That's a Democrat, by the way. That's not a Republican. That is a Democrat, Hispanic member of Congress, saying that the Biden policy right now is exacerbating the problem. All of these things, the culture war, the woke stuff, having to apologize for your skin color if you're not a minority, all of these things, they play together to give Republicans all sorts of gifts. Here's the thing. The media believes people vote their pocketbook. The reality is people vote their culture. And when they think their culture is under attack, they vote for the people they think are going to defend it. That's why so many people voted for Donald Trump in 2016. That the Democrats and the media don't get this as an opening for the GOP to get a whole lot of voters to vote for them in 2022. And guess what? In most states, the Republicans are going to be the ones to rewrite the congressional district lines. They'll use that to their advantage as well.
Want to be on the show? Call Eric.
This just into the Erick Erickson Show. They're coming for Curious George now. They're looking to cancel Curious George. The man in the yellow hat is a white imperialist colonizer who has taken a monkey from Africa. The racist undertones of taking a monkey from Africa back to white man civilization is apparently too much for Boko Haram. They also, Babar, the elephant, also has to be canceled, because it's a celebration of colonialism on how Babar goes back to the jungle to civilize his fellow animals. It's a meta-narrative on Africa, apparently. And also, the American Library Association has taken Laura Ingalls Wilder's name off a Lifetime Achievement Award it is giving because of her depiction of American Indians. I am also canceled for saying American Indians instead of Native Americans. Boko Haram comes for taking all the joy out of life. It is very much like the Taliban of American society. My goodness. The phone number here is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. What next will be canceled? When will the Burger King be canceled? Because King is some effort to dominate, and in dominating and not having a Burger Queen to complement or be equal to the Burger King, because Dairy Queen is not the same as Burger King. They're going to have to cancel the Burger King. So, plus, he looks like a creepy kid toucher. I mean, if we're honest about it, in the whole ad campaign, dude is creepy. I don't know who came up with the Burger King like that, but you might as well have Jeffrey Epstein as the face of the Burger King. It just, the whole thing is creepy. And then there's Ronald McDonald. What is it about the major fast food restaurants having like pervy characters? You got Grimace and Ronald McDonald. There's no reason. Wonder Grimace is grimacing with that creepy Ronald McDonald. I don't know, folks. Maybe it's time to up the brand. I'm sure Woko Haram will settle it for us all. But, I mean, at Chick-fil-A, they don't have any characters, and Woko Haram hates them the most because it's Jesus' favorite chicken. They're coming for them, too. Dan Cathy's birthday yesterday was I should wish Dan Cathy happy birthday a day late. The Chick-fil-A buyer, as an aside, I was told the other day, and it's not just the one buyer house. So I live in Macon, and I'm across the street in a development from a Chick-fil-A, and that Chick-fil-A is so busy that it backs up the traffic on the road outside my neighborhood. The traffic backs up as people try desperately to get into the Chick-fil-A, and the line backs up, and they've now got people out there taking your order with iPads. They put up screening to cover them and keep them in the shade. And I've heard now from multiple people that not just this Chick-fil-A, but multiple Chick-fil-A's are doing more business now than before the pandemic. They're doing more business with their restaurants closed than open. And one of the issues, I wonder if we're going to have a great rethink of restaurants. Do you need the playground at the McDonald's anymore? Or the Chick-fil-A? Do you need the playground? Why not have a drive-through only option now for some of these restaurants? You know, Chick-fil-A used to build drive-through only options. We had one in Macon for a while. I think they closed it down. But it was drive-through only. There was no indoor dining. And maybe they'll go back to that, kind of like the Checkers and the Rallies. So there's some table benches outside you can sit at, but you got to drive through to get your food by and large. I wonder if we're going to go back to that, a rethink of the restaurants. But man, I don't want my local restaurants to shut down. I've got a Mexican restaurant across the street from my house, and I'd love to just go in there and sit down and have a meal. They've got everybody spread out. They're doing it right. I worry about our local restaurants, because if you're a chain, to some degree, you've got a corporation that to some degree can help keep you afloat during troubling times. But local restaurants don't. We got to do what we can to help our local restaurants. That's why I like to go eat. I have no apologies for being fat right now. I'm going to local restaurants and eating and racking up big bills to keep them afloat. It's all about them. It's not about my stomach. It's about them. Well, here we go. 6 Dr. Seuss books, including And to Think I Saw It on Mulberry Street and If I Ran the Zoo, will stop being published because of racist and insensitive imagery. The business that preserves and protects the author's legacy said Tuesday. These books portray people in ways that are hurtful and wrong, Dr. Seuss Enterprises told the Associated Press in a statement that coincides with the late author and illustrator's birthday. Ceasing sales of these books is only part of our commitment and our broader plan to ensure Dr. Seuss Enterprises' catalog represents and supports all communities and families, it says. The other books include McElligot's Pool, On Beyond Zebra, Scrambled Egg Super, and The Cat's Quizzer. The decision to cease publication and sales of the books was made last year after months of discussion. The company, which was founded by the Seuss family, told the Associated Press, Dr. Seuss Enterprises listened and took feedback from our audience, including teachers, academics, and specialists in the field as part of our review process. We then worked with a panel of experts, including educators, to review our catalog of titles. In And to Think That I Saw It on Mulberry Street, an Asian person is portrayed wearing a conical hat, holding chopsticks and eating from a bowl. If I Ran the Zoo includes a drawing of 2 barefooted African men wearing what appears to be grass skirts with their hair tied above their heads. Books by Dr. Seuss have been translated into dozens of languages as well as Braille. He remains popular, earning an estimated $33 million before taxes in 2020, up from just $9.5 million 5 years ago. As adored as Dr. Seuss is by millions around the world for the positive values in many of his works, including environmentalism and tolerance, there has been increasing criticism in recent years over the way blacks, Asians, and others are drawn in some of his most beloved children's books. School districts around the country have also moved away from Dr. Seuss, prompting Loudoun County, Virginia schools just outside D.C. to douse rumors last month they were banning the book entirely. The National Education Association, which founded Read Across America Day in 1998 and deliberately aligned it with Dr. Seuss's birthday, has for several years de-emphasized Dr. Seuss. Research in recent years has revealed strong racial undertones in many books written or illustrated by Dr. Seuss, the school said. In 2017, a school librarian in Cambridge, Massachusetts, criticized a gift of 10 Seuss books from First Lady Melania Trump, saying many of his works were steeped in racist propaganda, caricatures, and harmful stereotypes. The Cat in the Hat will continue to be published for now, but has received criticism. Okay. Here's the thing. I don't know. I know I've never read Scrambled Egg Super, The Cat's Quizzer, McElligot's Pool, On Beyond Zebra, or And to Think I Saw It on Mulberry Street. Or I don't think I've read If I Ran the Zoo. I've read a lot of Dr. Seuss books, but I haven't read those, and I suspect most people have not read those books. I've read One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish, Oh, the Places You'll Go, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, Green Eggs and Ham, The Cat in the Hat, The Lorax, Horton Hears a Who, Hop on Pop, Dr. Seuss's ABC, Mr. Brown Can Moo, Can You? There's a Wocket in My Pocket. That one's going to come. Well, I don't know. That one may be embraced by the pedophiles. That one. There's a Wocket in My Pocket. What's that supposed to be about? I've read Yertle the Turtle. I've read that. I guess those are the big ones. And we're going to cancel Dr. Seuss because of 6 problematic books that he wrote early on, when his major books at the end of his life were the books that have been used for years to teach diversity, acceptance, tolerance. People have lost their minds. Let's go to the phones. Bill in Woodstock, you're going to be up next. Welcome to the program.
Hey, Eric. I'm going to go to my local used bookseller and buy all of those Seuss books I can get my hands on.
I would. By the way, I just looked on Amazon. If you want to buy, and I saw it on Mulberry Street, you got to pay $900.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I got some questions about cancel culture. Who drives this? Is there one person that gets this idea and then it spreads like wildfire? Is there a group of woke people that say, let's attack this next? Or how is it driven?
It's angry people on Twitter and in chat rooms of the left who start talking. What tends to happen is it tends to be one bitter soul who starts complaining and has a platform. It's an elitist person who's offended by something, and then it gravitates to the woke brigade. And it can happen across the board. It happens angry people who have grievances, and particularly given intersectionality and critical theory, if it is a person who is completely minority, they are transgendered, black, amputee, who is a non-Christian pagan, then suddenly they've got the most authority on this. When they speak up and say, I'm offended by X, Y, or Z, then we're all expected to be offended by X, Y, or Z, because that person has the most moral truth, given that they have the least power.
Well, I'm with a Fortune 500 company, and I've been working from home since March. And I apologize, I haven't called you since middle of February because they've given me more work to do. Anyway, I've got the whole bias training, diversity and inclusion training, and it turns out that, based on the test that I did, evidently I have some biases, and but so does everybody else. And then they say, but don't worry, your bias doesn't mean you're racist. It's crazy.
It is. And the Fortune 500 is doing this in large part because they are most captured by the wokes and scaredest of the wokes.
All right, so my question.
Go ahead.
Real quick, another question. So if this goes further, if this escalates to a quasi-civil war, how are they going to identify the woke versus the unwoke? Is it going to be masks? How many masks you're wearing? Or
maybe they can read your virtue. I mean, white men are going to be the number one targets because we have the most privilege, so we have to be eliminated. The whole thing is absurd. And of course, the non-wokes own more guns, so... if it were to ever go in that direction, I guess they would have to rethink things.
So am I gonna be less canceled than you because you saw my email post or whatnot? You know my last name from my subscription. So
yeah. I mean that's a fair point. You've got a little more protection than me. Because
my son used to get NAACP solicitations.
Oh man! Wow. I just this doesn't end well for any of us. Listen, Bill, I appreciate the phone call. It's always good to hear from you. This reminds me, Charlie just sent me this story. This is nuts. Amanda Gorman's white translator has quit. International book winner Marieke Lucas Rednefeld will not translate the inaugural poet's work into Dutch after anger that a black writer was not hired. Muhlenhoff said it was Redneveld's decision to resign and that Gorman, who is 22, had selected the 29-year-old translator herself as a fellow young writer who had come to fame early. So what this is, remember that the inaugural poet, Amanda Gorman, her inaugural poem has launched her to the top of the book charts. She hand-selected a 29-year-old author to translate her work into Dutch. The person that Amanda Gorman selected, Amanda Gorman is black, she selected a white writer who is an international award winner for her writing and now has to walk away because she selected someone who is white. And listen again, this is the woke language from the publisher. We want to learn from this by talking, and we will walk a different path with new insights. We will be looking for a team to work with to bring Amanda's words and message of hope and inspiration into translation as well as possible in her spirit. This is very much like the Twitch language. It's very passive. Please leave us alone now. We will learn from our mistakes. We apologize and hope to move forward with healing. You could almost make like one of those AI algorithms, you word salads. Whoever is pointing this out on Twitter, Fred Martin, says the most ridiculous part of this ridiculous story is the fact that the translator was selected by Amanda Gorman herself. They've removed agency from the people they're supposed to support and defend. So 19-year-old black author picks a 22-year-old black author, picks a 29-year-old white author to translate the 22-year-old's works into Dutch, and now has to fire the 29-year-old because she dared to pick someone who had merit but was white. This is where we are as a society, folks. This is the world the progressives want. This is the world the progressives want. They are, at this point, appropriating victimhood. There were no victims. This was a choice. This was a choice. And the choice of a black woman was ruled invalid by the wokes because she chose wrong. You will be made to care. I wrote this book in 2014, I think. You will be made to care. You will be made to care. They will force you to pick a side, and if you pick the wrong side, you will be punished. I want to say this very clearly and frankly with this latest story, the latest story being that Amanda Gorman, the 22-year-old who was the inaugural poet, picked a 29-year-old white woman to translate Amanda Gorman's work into Dutch and has now had to fire the 29-year-old white woman. Actually, the 29-year-old white woman quit because the wokes were outraged that a 22-year-old black woman would choose for herself a white woman to translate her works into Dutch. We are in increasingly dangerous times, and I don't think we can make light of that. When a 22-year-old black woman cannot make a decision for herself if she picks a white person to help her, this goes beyond the stated concerns of the woke. If you draw a cartoon that ridicules Muhammad, Boko Haram, the Islamic terrorist group in Africa, will come to kill you. If you draw a cartoon that offends the intersectional favorite group of the day, Boko Haram will not come to kill you, but will destroy your life. The only thing that separates the Islamic fundamentalist terrorists from the woke terrorists is death. Both want destruction, and that destruction is being administered to make others fear to stand up and speak out. How many cartoons of Muhammad have you seen since the Islamic terrorists stormed Charlie Hebdo and killed everyone for the cartoons of Muhammad? How many cartoons of Muhammad have you seen out there? There used to be a Muhammad cartoon day online. And people on the left would say, well, this is disrespectful. This is provoking violence. These are the same people on the left who now say, you got to cancel Dr. Seuss. You got to cancel Curious George. And a 22-year-old black lady cannot pick for herself a white 29-year-old female translator. This doesn't end well for any of us. It doesn't end well for them. The only way to win this fight against the woke terrorists of America is to not play the game. The only way to stand up to the woke people out there, who are overwhelmingly privileged white rich kids who are spoiled, the only way to fight against them is to not play the game and to not care and to continue on about your business. Now, the problem here is that some people will see it as an opportunity to overly inflame, to overly exploit, and to bait them into outrage. when really what you need to do is don't bait them into outrage. Just ignore them. Go about your life. Buy Dr. Seuss books and Curious George books for your kid. Don't get to a point where you feel like you've got to do incendiary things. Oh, I'm sure they'll say, well, you call them Woko Haram like a terrorist group. Well, they're behaving like one. They're engaged in acts of cancel culture to destroy lives, to make people fear and stop doing what they're doing. They are using essentially political violence where no one dies but lives are destroyed in order to advance an agenda. They are terroristic in what they're doing. And we should call them out and not engage with them. Just laugh at them. Laugh at they're canceling Curious George now, having come for Mr. Potato Head and Dr. Seuss. Surely there are more important things in life, but not for Woko Hurrah.
You're listening to the Erick Erickson Show, the perfect.
Real quick, Tucker Brewing in Georgia, here in Georgia, is in the running for best beer garden in America. And I hope you'll consider voting for him and support the hometown team against groups in Arizona, California, Virginia. Support Tucker Brewing. You should go visit them anyway. If you text the word data to 33777, I'll send you back a link, and it just says vote for Tucker. If you click the link, it'll open your browser, and you will automatically see it, and all you do is click the vote button. And just you can do it every day, trying to drive up support for Tucker Brewing so that they beat every other group in the nation. They are ranked 4 out of 20. We got to get them to number 1. So support Tucker Brewing. A buddy of mine texted me, a listener texted me, and when I was mentioning restaurants, pointed out Satterfield's in Macon. So there's this restaurant in downtown Macon. It was a barbecue restaurant. For years, Christy and I used to go there all the time. You get boiled peanuts and barbecue. And the original owner decided to sell. They were bought by a couple in Macon. And they decided to renovate and reopen. And they've been doing barbecue now for about a year. And they did this right before the pandemic. I think their restaurant is open now. but you're working downtown at a time more and more offices are closed. It's hard to sustain restaurants like Satterfield's. And whether there's a Satterfield's in your area or another local restaurant, consider that support. There are some institutions that have been around for so long, they naturally draw support, like the Rookery down in Macon I've mentioned before, it's a great burger place. You go up to Roswell, you go to Table in Maine, go to U-Join in Clayton. There are all sorts of places around the state that have natural followings, but these new restaurants that have opened in the last year or so, they're on hard times. And man, I would love to do a restaurant brewery tour around the state with listeners. Show up and say, hey, I'm going to be broadcasting from this location. Show up. Maybe at some point I'll be able to do something like that around the state, around the nation, just to highlight the local businesses that are on hard times. There are so many businesses. And one of my frustrations with Washington these days is that both sides of the aisle are guilty of this. This isn't Republican or Democrat. Both Republicans and Democrats pay attention to money. And it's the big businesses. It's the Fortune 500 that gets the attention. The small guys have to deal with, go through the National Federation of Independent Business, NFIB, and other groups like that. It's the Business Roundtable, the Chamber of Commerce that look after the Home Depots, the Coca-Colas, the Apples, the Amazons, that they get attention from Congress. The big companies. But what about the Satterfield's Barbecue in Macon? What about the local mom and pop chain where you are? What about the local brewery that can't open its doors to visitors in your neck of the woods? They don't have lobbyists, and they need help. And Congress is more interested in messaging through the COVID legislation than actually helping these small businesses. For example, Nancy Pelosi wants a subway tunnel in the COVID relief bill. And the Republicans tried to kill the tunnel and send the funding to help with mental health and suicide prevention for kids suffering isolation due to schools being closed. Democrats said, nope, we want the tunnel. We don't want to help the kids with mental health. They don't want to help the small businesses. So much of the COVID package helps major Fortune 500 companies. For all of the people who claim they're worried about a totalitarian, authoritarian, populist uprising from the right, maybe they should be worried about helping the businesses in real need. They're attacking Dave Portnoy from Barstool Politics for day trading and trying to get people into the stock market. They don't pay attention to the work that he's done, helping small businesses around the country, bailing out small businesses that need the money around the country. So many of these businesses trying, competing, desperate for money. They don't help. It's sad. It's sad. So that's why I give a shout out to a place like Satterfield's in Macon that would love customers today for lunch, I'm sure. Or Tucker Brewing, text data to 33777 to help them. I wish I could help all the small businesses out there. I can't. The ones that I can, I want to help. And I want to go eat. And I want these restaurants to be around when I can start going out in public without masks and hanging out inside restaurants instead of outside. And we should all want that. So be a good neighbor where you can. Help your local restaurant industry survive if you can. Some people can't, but if you can, step up and help them. Make sure they're there for everybody when we can all go back to life again.